Hello, sir. We are
Hey,
live.
how are you?
Good, man. It's Yechezkel. I got to pronounce. Maybe you can pronounce it correctly.
Here it's
Yechezkel.
Yechezkel.
Yechezkel
It's
Moskowitz. What's up, man? It's good to see you finally.
good to see you too.
We chatted on the phone, and now we have a chance to talk. Shout out to J.R. Majewski, who put us in touch, mutual friend of ours.
Oh,
And
absolutely. JR is one of the best.
oh, I love him so much. J.R., you're out there. You're listening right now. I know it.
You know the story that did JR tell you the story how we met?
No.
So I'm like looking to hire a like basically like a COO for my company. So this recruiter comes to me and he's like basically tells me like there is this guy out there, JR Majewski, that you really need to talk to. He's like a leader in the industry. And right then in tandem, like another friend of mine is like, there's this really based candidate that you need to get behind and support. His name is JR Majewski. So ended up meeting JR Majewski through that kind of way. And he's like, look, man, I'm not planning on looking to get out of the industry, and I just want to run and do serve the country and do what bring back those dreams of the American people. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Here, shut up and take my money. But I didn't really think he was gonna win the primary. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like this guy, like he's just too real, And today, like in order to be a politician and win, you have to be willing to, become part of the swamp. Really, it's like just how it is on both sides of the aisle. You really have to sell out, and he was not a sellout. So, but then he won the primary, and everybody in both the Republican conservatives and the folks that were all like, don't get behind this candidate, it's just going to end up going nowhere. And then he ended up winning the primary, which I was kind of shocked about. But frankly, then he just ended up running, and they kind of shivved him in the end of his election cycle with lies. So that was kind of depressing, but he's now, I heard, getting back into it, and I think he has a really good shot.
Yeah, he's a steamroller. For people that don't know, JR was running for Senate in Ohio. And that's how we met. He was actually on Timcast IRL last week. Gosh, I guess it was last week at this point. Yeah, it was last week. And we hit it off. Cool dude, put us in touch. Shout out to JR. And he worked in the energy sector. He worked for nuclear power plants. He was like going around designing I don't know if he was actually designing nuclear power plants, but he was doing all sorts of design work with like in the energy
He's like
sector.
actually doing construction works. In fact, he's one of the few people out there who actually has real construction experience. In fact, at his previous job, he was involved in building the dome around the Chernobyl site for the company he was working for, and he actually oversaw that project and did it ahead of schedule, under budget. The guy's a stud, really professional. And look, he wants to serve his country. I wish he would have come and worked for us. We could use him.
Yeah, well, we work together. I like how you put that, because we're still, even if we don't work on the same corporate payroll, we're working together to kind of at least proliferate. For me, I'm proliferating the data. I'm really interested. So we started talking about nuclear power and like nuclear waste, and how I was like, oh, have you heard of these nuclear diamond batteries where they like put nuclear waste inside of diamonds and it's producing like 10,000 years of electrical charge? He's like, dude, I got a guy I got to introduce you to. And he was talking about you.
Yeah, that's really cool, because like those nuclear diamond batteries, so obviously people don't know this, but when we put our fuel into reactors, only 4% of the fuel is actually used. 96% of the energy material inside that fuel doesn't actually get used. Now, during the fission process, there's these different new isotopes that are being created during that process, including cesium-137 and strontium-90. So if you can extract that material and bring it to the market, then companies like NDB Batteries and Zeno Power, BWXT, and other vendors have the ability to actually use that material and create these batteries. In fact, I just saw recently public-facing Zeno Power is doing all kind of work with Department of Defense and Department of Energy and other vendors with NASA to use these type of nano diamond batteries. And the diamond is for the shielding, by the way. The synthetic diamond is there for the shielding, because this material is extremely radioactive. That's why it's so hot and it's emanating that electricity. So if you could figure out that like conversion matrix, where you're able to take that conversion and bring the electricity out, then you could, in theory, you could just like put like down at the bottom of the ocean a like a nano diamond battery with strontium 90 and recharge like deep sea probes and stuff like that. That's like what like Xeno Power is looking to do.
Xeno Power, one of your companies?
No. It's just but they're just a company out there that are doing this. They are. I wish them all the best. You know, at the end of the day, I'm like a lover. I'm not a hater. I want everybody to succeed, because at the end of the day, I'm in the nuclear waste disposition business. But what we've done is that we've created technology, our new cycle technology, which is patented, by the way, all 24 claims, which my attorney told me it's like a huge deal when you go and you patent something, and every single one of your claims you hit off, check the box, check. And we figured out, kind of cracked the code, how to basically recycle the nuclear waste, or otherwise known as reprocess it, by actually extracting all the commodities. And that's like a really important thing, because, and this is like, we're just like going all over the place, but like the main issue, people don't know this, but like nuclear waste originally, or what we call spent nuclear fuel or nuclear waste or used nuclear fuel, whatever you want to call it, what used to be is they used to create these reactors. Originally, the first reactors that existed were actually built for power. They were not built for weapons. But then, obviously, with World War II and the Manhattan Project, and everybody now knows about Oppenheimer, so like there was a plan of, well, what if we can, use like Fermi's reactor technology and actually use it to make a nuclear weapon that can blow things up in a much more efficient way. So the question is, though, in order to do that, you need to either enrich uranium or you need to use plutonium. Now, plutonium is a much better fissile material for a nuclear weapon than enriched uranium is. So the only way to get plutonium is through fission. In other words, you have to put it into a nuclear reactor, put uranium into nuclear reactor, and let the nuclear process happen, the fission process happen, and then the uranium breeds other materials. So one of those materials is plutonium. So then they basically said, well, you now have these rods that have this plutonium as part of their, material composition. How do you extract it? So there was a process called Purex, which was created during this whole Manhattan Project process, where they were able, because the Manhattan Project didn't just stop with Oppenheimer and the nuclear the bomb, right? They obviously continued till the 70s. For many, many years, they were doing all kind of experiments. So during the 40s and the 50s, they basically figured out that if you use nitric acid for chemical separation, you could separate out pure plutonium, so therefore it was a lot more efficient to just build a lot of reactors, which they called breeder reactors. And they were just breeding plutonium and then extracting it with all this nitric acid. Now, in those days, they didn't really care about the environment the way we do today. Like it seems to be like there's like a transpartisan awareness that we got to like be a little bit more sustainable and take care of our environment. And like everybody has their reasons, but whatever that is, at the end of the day, what they ended up with was 57 million gallons of nitric acid, radioactive nitric acid, up in the Hanford site in Washington near the Tri-Cities. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, tell me about it.
So there's these massive tanks. You could like literally pull it up right now and you could look it up.
What's it called?
The Hanford site, the waste tanks.
Gotta look at these.
So they were basically doing this chemical separation with this system called Purex, and they were basically all the waste. This waste is like the largest U.S. cleanup project in history. Is this Hanford site where they have these 57 million or maybe even billion, but I think it's 57 million gallons of waste of this nitric acid. And it's like a massive cleanup project. It costs the taxpayer billions and billions of dollars a year. I think every year they have to appropriate to like between like $6 to $8 billion. So like they've been trying different ways to figure out how to like get this waste problem to go away. But now they think they built like a vitrification plant where they're going to turn this waste into glass. But the bottom line is, we don't want to do recycling that way. We want to do it with three components. You want to do it in an economical way. You want to do it where you don't produce any pure plutonium. So therefore you can help transition nuclear from the psyche of a nuclear weapons orientation to an energy orientation. And then three, you want to make sure that you don't create any nitric acid ever, right? So like that way you don't have another Hanford site. So we've created this dry, modular, semi-autonomous process, which basically does all of those things and more. And the more and more we learned about the process, the more we were like, wow, we could really extract all of these commodities. And it's literally like a reframing of the nuclear waste as one of the most valuable materials in the world, right? Now, the US is at an impasse because that we've never actually, during the Carter administration, they were like, well, yeah, they were like, oh my gosh, everybody's proliferating nuclear weapons, so we need to figure out what we're going to do about it. So what they did was they said, well, we're going to stop recycling. We're going to stop the reprocessing. And they thought that if they do that, then every other country in the world, the Russians and everybody else, were just going to just, follow suit. What happened is that we just created this massive vacuum where all the other countries basically started building up their own nuclear capabilities and using it as a economic tool to drive their influence across the globe. Meanwhile, the U.S. kind of stagnated in that space in a really big way.
So as I was pulling it up, the one challenge of not having a young Jamie, that's a reference to Joe Rogan's podcast, to pull up my stuff, is when I turn and start to type stuff, my perception starts to wane about what you're saying. But you're saying that the United States was making the fuel and they were recycling it and causing nitric acid waste, but then they decided to stop doing that because of the waste, and other countries just kept doing it.
So they stopped doing it. They stopped doing it because it was not so much about the waste. It was that the process created a pure plutonium stream, which is like pure plutonium to make weapons. Now, plutonium is not just a weapons material. It can also be used for fuel. But the United States government, at the end of the day, did not want to create more plutonium. So under President Carter, they're like, let's stop making plutonium. So like there's two fissile materials that have been, there's really three fissile materials that are used in nuclear weapons, right? The first is uranium, which if it's enriched, which is why like the whole thing with Iran is like a big deal, because that everybody doesn't want Iran to enrich their uranium to a high level of enrichment, because then they could make a nuclear weapon. Now, plutonium is a separate type of material that's fissile, but plutonium does not exist in nature, unlike uranium. So you can't enrich plutonium. You have to extract plutonium from a nuclear fuel rod that has gone through the fissile process. It's pretty incredible what nature does, how nature is basically able to, human beings are able to create new elements through nuclear energy. It's pretty incredible. So.
Oh yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, please, you have a question.
Well, I was gonna say, everybody like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow both of our work. Send in super chats, super minds, wherever you're at, whatever network you're on. I want to keep going with Rabbi Yechezkel. I want to get this perfectly right. Yeah, Yechezkel Moskowitz. Okay,
nice.
Let's continue.
Good job.
So you got plutonium, uranium, and then what's the third?
And the third is uranium-233, which is when you introduce a thorium element, which is another type of metal, into the fission process, you could breed a fissile material also called uranium-233, which is well known in the in the fandom as a thorium molten salt reactor. That would be where it would be used. And the reason why thorium is so special is because that thorium basically replicates itself. So the fuel that you put into the reactor basically stays the same because it's constantly breeding itself. So you never run out of fuel in this uranium-233 fuel as long as you feed it the element thorium.
So you have uranium-233, which is, what is that, like uranium with added neutrons or something? How does that?
It's basically like uranium-233 is like a fissile material like plutonium or like enriched uranium.
So it's produced from the uranium fission process?
Yeah, it's a fission product of a plutonium of plutonium combining with thorium when it's in a breeder reactor.
And then the byproduct is it creates more thorium, which you put
and then you feed it thorium, like you basically introduce thorium into the mix, and it will continue breeding itself.
So of these three, what do you think is the best? Like you've got enriched uranium, plutonium, and uranium-233, I think is what you said.
So I think that what's the best, honestly, is all three of them. We should be doing a closed fuel cycle. we extract uranium from the ground, from mining, or from mining. You then put that uranium in regular reactors, then extract the plutonium through like a new cycle process, put that into a breeder reactor, and then now introduce in that breeder reactor a thorium element, which is more abundant than lead, and then start breeding uranium-233 and build a massive fleet of thorium molten salt reactors. And now you have what we call a closed fuel cycle, because the uranium-233 in a iso breeding configuration will never produce more than it consumes, right? So it's basically truly sustainable. And the craziest thing is, like, you'll say, like, well, Rabbi, how do you know that this is true and this works? I'll tell you the truth. Our two biggest geopolitical adversaries, Russia and China, are pursuing this fuel cycle.
That's interesting. So tell me about enriching uranium. I'm a kind of a novice with this stuff, so I'm learning it as we go. But how do you enrich uranium?
So there's two types of ways to enrich uranium. One is the common way, which is with like these gas centrifuges. There's a company actually just today announced, Centrus. They are one of the U.S. funded government programs. They've been getting billions of dollars. They are using uranium to enrich the uranium, and through their special process that they've developed. But a lot of companies do that. Right now, most of the enrichment that happens in the world actually is Russian enrichment. The Russians basically have a monopoly through their company Rosatom, which is a state-owned company, and they basically have a monopoly over enrichment. And basically, it's actually pretty incredible. During the whole Ukraine conflict, there was a lot of interest, do sanctions on Russia, but the big dirty secret was that they didn't stop importing Russian nuclear fuel into the U.S. And the reason why is because we would have had rolling brownouts if we would have not brought in Russian fuel. Now, the reason why we rely completely on Russia for this is a long, crazy story, but it basically goes back to the Clinton era. So during the Clinton era, there was just like there was like a very big interest in kind of like decoupling the U.S. from nuclear and moving into like biofuels. And it was like a bit during the Al Gore era when like the whole environmental craze was really kind of starting. I'm 36, so like I was growing up with like Man Bear Pig on South Park. Like that was what it was for me. Remember the Man Bear Pig?
I know it, but I haven't seen. I got to see the episode again.
Yeah, but like South Park was also making fun of it. But look, the bottom line is that the United States had what was called the United States Enrichment Corporation, and during the early 90s, we wanted to do kind of like peace with the Russians. So the sacrificial lamb of that entire like peace process was basically putting the miners here in the U.S. and the enrichers here in the U.S. out of business, and basically offshoring that ability and capability to Russia. And the Russians basically did this, what was called the atoms. It was called the megatons to megawatts program, it was like the whole purpose of it was that the Russians were supposedly going to downblend their nuclear warheads and then send us the nuclear warheads as fuel for our reactors. But what that basically did was it killed the Russians were able to undercut the American producers. So we basically destroyed the entire U.S. production capability during the 90s. So to this very day, we are reliant on Russia for our fuel supply needs.
How do you downblend nuclear weapons into fuel?
You introduce a whole bunch of fission products to it, which it's basically taking a plutonium, which is a pure plutonium stream, and you basically are introducing different elements to it, so that way it's no longer weapons grade material.
Does it turn it back into uranium, or does it stay as plutonium?
It basically becomes like you mix it with uranium.
Okay, so you said that's one way. So I imagine, did this craze all come from the Chernobyl meltdown, like the meltdown fear that there's going to be a meltdown that would forever annihilate the vicinities? They're like, get
So
these
it's
nuclear plants.
interesting. I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I'm in the middle of writing a book about the history of nuclear energy in this country. I'm like 180 pages in because it became like a passion project for me. Like, I'm not only invested in nuclear, but it's become a very like the crown jewel of what I'm doing right now, and it's one of the most important things that I think I'm doing. And because I think that it will create thousands of jobs in this country, and really, it's important to like just onshore everything. But that said, the main issue why I think there was an interest to go away from nuclear was several. The main issue was basically that there was that fear of the meltdown that kind of happened with Chernobyl and then 3 Mile Island. Like there was a couple events that happened. There's a great Netflix documentary on this 3 Mile Island that is worth watching, and I actually was pretty surprised because it's pretty balanced. But the kicker is that by that point, the regulatory matrix became so burdensome for nuclear reactors that there was no ability really to affordably make nuclear reactors anymore. Now, people don't realize that during the initial Carter era, there was the whole oil embargo and the whole oil crisis. So Carter wanted to build 1,000 nuclear reactors. And then out of nowhere, the whole Columbia River Keepers and a whole bunch of these more environmentalist groups, they popped up and came into being. Also, it didn't help that, Hollywood produced a film called China Syndrome with Jane Fonda that also was like a huge fear-mongering film. And what ended up happening was that there was a very interesting alliance that now has been, exposed between the oil and gas and coal industry and the environmentalists to kill nuclear. Meanwhile, 3 Mile Island, just for the record, is like the worst thing that could have happened actually happened, and no one died.
What
right?
happened?
Basically, the reactor melted down, and
explain that. What is that? What does that mean? What happens when a reactor melts?
So when a reactor basically melts down is that now the way our reactors that we have today, like that are being built by like General Electric, right? GE Verona has a BWRX 300, and Westinghouse has the AP 1000. These are what we call. There's different types of reactors. Let's just go back for a second, right? So there's basically water-cooled reactors, which are where you have these reactors that are doing the energy, right? And obviously they become really hot, and they are cooled down through a water-based system. So the water is keeping the reactor cool, right? Now, and that's why we build those massive containment domes, right? Because if it would heat up to such a high temperature, the reactor in a meltdown, then all of that water would become steam, and then it could go boom, right? It would just explode. So then what happens if that happens, then obviously the reactor top is there to secure that explosion. That's why it's so big and cumbersome, because it's meant to stop that from happening, which it does, right? Then there are gas-cooled reactors, which are supposedly going to be safer. And then during the 70s, there was what they called the molten salt experiment, which is what we call walkaway safe. And the reason, and the lack of funding and the lack of the nuclear getting a bad rap during 3 Mile Island, the whole downward trajectory for nuclear stopped the program in its tracks. But we were almost there when we were building these molten salt reactors that are basically using so salt, if you heat it up to a very high temperature, it becomes a liquid. And they were using that as a coolant. And now what happens is that if there's a meltdown, now the fuel obviously is in the coolant, so it's one and the same, right? And two is that if, God forbid, there's a meltdown, then the whole reactor shuts down, and then the salt goes back down to normal temperatures, and it becomes a salt again. So you never have a meltdown ever.
So because of radioactive salt, essentially, like a corium.
Essentially, yeah. And but it's much easier to clean up because that salt is salt and it becomes salt, right? So it's a much easier process. And the way that they have these like tanks where it just drops into. there's a whole different, it's a whole different technology, and it is going to be the future of nuclear reactors. I firmly believe that.
I've heard of liquid salt reactors, or not, they're not reactors, but just liquid salt. Like what they'll do is they take a bunch of mirrors. You may have seen these power plants, and they just reflect sunlight to this central thing that's like holding a tank of salt, melts the salt, turns it into liquid, and then that boils water and creates steam power.
So that is a molten salt utilization. It's the same technology, but just being used in exactly through obviously heating up salt. Like they talk about, molten salt tanks to conserve electricity, right? And I believe TerraPower is doing this with their Natrium reactor, to have these molten salt tanks where they're going to store electricity inside them, like these massive molten salt batteries. But that's real utilization of the technology.
So, like, if I'm going to pull it up just for reference, this is what it looks like. These solar things all beaming the energy right here into the central salt tank. Pretty cool. 24/7 power at night. The salt is still liquid and hot, so it's still boiling the water at night.
Exactly. Completely. It's a great utilization of the technology.
So if you irradiate and the salt, then is that salt also used for the steam? Like, is that
so
salt
yeah, so in the molten salt, you would basically do the same thing. You would have this molten salt that would be really hot, because we right now don't have, we're working on it, but we don't yet have, see, how does electricity get generated, period? All through turbines, which are all through steam. We don't have the technology yet where, imagine if we had a technology where you were able to create a power source, right? And you were able to literally take that power source, put it into an orb, and then now basically connect a wire to it like a USB, and all that electricity, on all that power density inside would actually be extracted and put into the grid, right? You'd have much better electrical management, right? But the problem is, and output. But the problem is that we don't do that. We actually lose a ton of electricity with all of our power plants, because that our conversion systems are horrible. And this is a global issue. It's not just in the US. So they're working on figuring out how to do better conversion. But right now, the best conversion is through turbines, which is where the steam hits those turbines, and then the turbines turn around, which is, by the way, why there are those massive stacks at nuclear power plants. Those stacks are there to capture the steam that is coming from those boiling water reactors, right? Those reactors are boiling so hot that they create the steam, and then they go and they create the steam, and the steam goes up into the turbine, and the turbine spins, and that spinning motion creates the electricity that goes into the grid.
I'm really interested in piezoelectricity, or piezo. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but it's the idea that you can collect energy out of vibration, that it can cause an electrical charge. And
I'm a big believer that that's the future. That's probably one of the most important parts of energy innovation for the future. So let's just jump back to your first question, right? Nano diamond battery. The reason why it's hard to capture that energy is because of the conversion system, not because of the actual energy within.
Yeah, I was watching. Oh, continue.
No, I'm just saying, like, so how do you convert the electricity, right? That's the hardest. That's one of the biggest challenges.
I think one of the things about graphene that I love are just the hexagonal lattice, these benzene lattices of like honeycomb lattices. Maybe I can pull one up for reference. Let's see here. Graphene. I mean, pretty much everybody knows what it looks like, and if you don't, it's just like, here, I'll pull it up right now. These lattices have like the structure that here it is on the right, these things that if they bend, they're never truly flat. They're always kind of wavering, and that wavering itself can create an electrical charge. And I wonder if when you store like a super hot heat inside like these nuclear diamond batteries, I was reading about what it does, and it's like, does it send neutrons through this lattice, and then it causes the lattice to agitate, which produces an electrical charge?
Yeah, absolutely. These are like highly technical issues that like I leave to the scientists, but at the end of the day, that's essentially, there are a lot of innovative ideas out there. The question is really finding the right one that's going to that's commercializable, right? Because like the economics are for sure the biggest challenge in this whole story.
And you've got a few companies, speaking of economics, where you fund. I'm going to pull up Synergos. Is it how you pronounce it? Synergos or Synergos?
Yeah, Synergos, yeah.
Synergos. Is this your main? You have like investment companies where you. How
Yeah,
would
so
you describe?
we have this basically like a small venture studio. We haven't really raised any money to the venture studio. We want to eventually do that, partner with a couple good people. But what we're basically doing is we're investing in deep tech that's sustainable, that can actually offer solutions that are most importantly that are patriotic and that are socially conscious, that create opportunities for Americans. That's really what it's about.
So would you be looking for people that are working on these nuclear diamond batteries and just accelerate?
Yeah, I
Step on the
mean,
gas?
we are right now partnered with a couple of those companies, but always happy to work with more companies. And one of the things that those companies have that is the biggest challenge for them is their supply. They don't have a lot of supply because that material is stuck in the basically over. It's right now we have in the United States one of the largest nuclear waste supply in the world, right? We have 96,000 metric tons of nuclear waste. Every single year, we add another about 2,000 metric tons to the nuclear waste because of our reactors that are operating. The globe produces about 11,000 metric tons of nuclear waste. Nuclear basically is about 20% of our energy mix, and it's over 50% of our quote unquote carbon free energy mix. Now, all of that nuclear waste is just sitting around because the federal government has never been able to actually solve the nuclear waste problem. Now, are you familiar at all with the nuclear waste problem?
What I know of it is that it gets put in these like canisters, and then they put the warning radioactive, and then they just set
Right,
them somewhere. Like
exactly.
in
So,
Fukushima, the flood hit and took away all this nuclear waste into the ocean or something. If I think that's what
so,
happened, correct me if
so,
I'm wrong.
so the nuclear waste. What happened in Fukushima was that there was a meltdown, and again, like what? So back to this, just to get back to the meltdown question. So the meltdown is that when the reactor heats up too much, and it gets to a really high temperature, then the fuel in the rods, the cladding and the metal, basically all melts down into liquid, because that's what happens to metal when it reaches really high temperatures. So now what happens is that when you have a meltdown, that whole area becomes contaminated because it gets absorbed into the water, it gets absorbed into everything, right? So then that becomes a huge challenge, and it becomes a massive cleanup project. Now with Fukushima, part of the cooling system, all that water got basically contaminated with nuclear spent but by coming into contact with the melted spent fuel. So therefore the water is radioactive. But people say, from what I understand, it's pretty safe, relatively speaking. And there are folks on LinkedIn who say they would drink the water. I would never drink the water, but they could go ahead and knock themselves out, you know?
And then what is that? Cesium is the
Like,
radioactive.
yeah, like cesium 137 and strontium 90 and these different fission products that are on a particle that are very small. Yeah.
And so what I heard is that the ocean, the flooding from the earthquake or whatever came and just washed a bunch of it into the ocean. And it's like, dear God. So like that's a nuclear waste problem. But I think you're more generally talking about the nuclear waste
So the
problem.
nuclear waste problem that got into the ocean, like, just to be honest with you, based on like the science, was not as bad as people think. It gets a really bad rap. It sounds scary, and if it was scary, it would be a problem, right? But it's not as scary as it really is, because there's this like radiophobia in this country. People don't realize though that when they eat 5 bananas, they get a bigger dose of radiation than they would by going to the dentist. And when you go to the dentist, right, they put that whole contraption on you, right, and you end up with this massive. You think, oh my God, I'm getting an X-ray and I'm going to get infused with radioactivity. Meanwhile, when you eat a banana, bananas are pretty radioactive. People don't know this. Now, obviously, there's a whole chapter about it in this book they're writing. But the nuclear waste problem that I'm talking about is, what do you do with the nuclear waste after it comes out of a reactor? So we say that when the nuclear waste comes out of the reactor the way it is right now, because of the blended materials that are within those rods after they were used with only 4% energy capacity, by the way. So 96% of the energy is still there, the value. And that's all regulatory. It has nothing to do with actual logic. And you could probably get them to burn a little longer, but still, for safety reasons, we're never going to end up just leaving those rods there forever. That said, there was a project called Yucca Mountain where they were going to basically take all the material and put it out in the desert in Nevada, where there was this mountain where the federal government spent about $15 billion to figure out where to put all this stuff. And there was 3 different sites, and then they ended up picking Yucca Mountain. But then there was a senator named Harry Reid who basically made sure that the Yucca project never got off the ground, and it became literally politically toxic. And they called it the Screw Nevada bill, basically, to take all the nuclear waste from all over the country and basically dump it in Yucca Mountain. Now, I have to be fair, putting all the nuclear waste in geologic isolation down there forever, or putting it in this cave, not a problem at all, completely safe. The science is all there, it would be fine. But what it would do, which is why I oppose the Yucca Mountain project, is it would be very wasteful, because it basically is like, taking a material that's extremely valuable and throwing it away. And just to put that into like comparables, coal, right? We right now burn coal, and it costs us about $150 a metric ton of coal. Coal can be turned into graphene and graphite with different advanced processes, which would upmark the value of coal from $150 to a metric ton to $3,000 a metric ton, right? So, like, why are we burning coal? We should be using it as a manufacturing material and cultivating those technologies. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, we're a very wasteful society, and I don't mean it from a perspective of like, oh my gosh, we're so wasteful. I mean it more like we're wasteful that we don't fully utilize all of the natural resources that we have to maximize the outcomes for humanity.
Exactly. Just the waste is not using the transmutation of byproduct. Like it's only waste if we don't use what comes out. The carbon dioxide is only waste if we don't turn it back into graphene. And it was 60. Graphene was worth 60,000 a ton until they figured out the flash Joule heating process on coal. And now you can they've brought the price down to $3,000 a ton. I was just talking to James Tour about it on Friday on this same channel.
Yeah, so that's exactly the point, that like you could literally upscale materials that we traditionally look at as cheap garbage and turn it into truly valuable manufacturing materials, which, by the way, if we onshore it, will create hundreds, if not thousands, of American jobs that are skilled based trades, right? Not college degree trades. Mostly will end up employing, frankly, young white males, and that's the people who need the most jobs in this country, because that, unfortunately, for all kind of reasons, people don't hire them anymore, right? And frankly, that's a problem. We need to create job. We can't leave anybody behind. We need to really take care of our people.
Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah, continue.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean, we have all this immigration too. I'm down. Just hire. Let's make jobs for everybody if we can. Like, don't stop nowhere. Like, we need to continue being the best producer of jobs manufacturing on earth.
Absolutely, and I think that it really boils down to what our mindset is as a country. Like, are we an exporter, or are we an importer? If you want to become an exporter, then yeah, like, we're going to need more people. We're going to need to grow our workforce. We're going to need to be able to become providers. But we have enough natural resources, and we have enough scientific and intellectual talent across our country to basically become that city on a hill and be that what that American dream was. Like, my grandfather grew up and was a classic baby boomer, went to Cooper Union University, chemical engineer, worked in a national lab, then worked as a math teacher and a superintendent in Nassau County here in New York, and did a whole bunch of stuff, is living on a tier 1 pension, doing pretty well for himself, but he worked hard and lived that American dream. I don't think that is there anymore for a lot of people, but that's because that we gave up on that dream. We don't believe in ourselves anymore.
A lot of people don't, and it's unfortunate, but we can. I do. And I think it's a lot of it's like we just can't rest on our laurels and rely on 80-year-old technology anymore. Rockefeller gave us the oil for the 20th century. Now we need to upscale that stuff into new materials for the 21st century, in particular, like this nuclear waste in the mountain that you're talking about. What would it look like if we were to extract that and reuse it? What would be that process?
Well, so if we use so like our new cycle technology is basically combining three already pre-existing technologies that exist that are used in various industries, and basically combining them in our proprietary blend to basically extract all of the uranium that exists. So basically, overnight, at a full scale capacity, we would become one of the largest uranium producers in the world by extracting about 3,800. So there's, let's say, at a 4,000 metric ton facility, we'd be extracting 3,800 metric tons of uranium for the market from that 4,000 metric tons from the waste. So you're talking about 4,000 metric tons of waste, already 3,800 metric tons, 3,800 metric tons of uranium is going right back into the market. That's 40% of the US market. And then you couple that with the 40 metric tons of transuranics that we extract in our blended form. So it's not pure plutonium. So it's rebranding plutonium as a fuel. That's another 40 metric tons. That is the equivalent energy density, essentially, to power 800 reactors a year. Okay, so that's a lot of fuel. Now you extract about 12 or so isotopes to bring into the market, like for that nano diamond battery, for MRIs, CAT scans, all type of defense applications, etc. You end up with like basically 3 to 4% of the material left over that all in all, based on its density, would literally fit in this like 450 to 500 square foot room.
When you say of the 4,000 tons facility that you could do 3,800 tons, would that be a day or a year?
A year.
Okay.
So we would basically we want to build eventually, we have a scalable approach, but what we want to eventually build is one, maybe two, then three 4,000 metric tons facilities, which would extract all of that, would take like about, so for us, for the US specifically, a 4,000 metric ton facility would take 2,000 metric tons a year of the old waste, and then 2,000 metric tons of the new waste.
Okay. So you'd no
And
longer
then,
be producing the 2,000 yearly
and
waste.
then we wouldn't be producing waste anymore. We would only be taking that kind of number and going backwards. But at the same time, if we bring new reactors online, which I hope we do, then we'll be able to also supply fuel on the back end that comes right out and goes to those other reactors.
I think you would have to make new reactors because we'd run out of the spent fuel over. I mean, if you're doing
for sure, within a 50-year
year
period, we would run out of spent fuel.
But I imagine fission. I mean, it's just such a powerful energy source, and especially if you can get the waste and like reuse it immediately right out of the plant. Like you don't have to go take it places and leave it around. You can just
you let it cool down in the pools on site for a year or two, and then right away you then transfer it securely to this recycling facility and extract it.
What company is it that does this stuff of yours?
This is a company called that we are building is called Curio.
Oh, Curio. Okay, so I've got a slide from Curio. I'm gonna presentation.
That sure. Pull up. Awesome.
You sent this one to me, and I'll blast through these. But this is cool.
So that's a picture of our facility at our full scale. It would be a 4,000 metric ton facility. It would basically employ about 10,000 people, with about and make pretty nice profit margins in congruently, and you would have about 80% of them would be skill-based trades.
Just for the record, did you hear that ding just now on my end? Ding, ding, ding. No. Oh, good. Thank God. Where do you want to build this thing?
I want to build it in coal country.
So like Northeast kind of?
Like I want to build it in like, either in the Northern Appalachia region, like Central West PA, West Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, somewhere in that kind of, that's my target, or like the Panhandle in Maryland. Like I want to build it because I want to bring a brand new life to those communities. Like from my perspective, this will turn the region they'll create a tech corridor, which will be like turn the region into like the Dubai of nuclear energy.
Oh, sweet. We could build a monorail too. Maybe we can
Yeah,
build
no,
a
it would be really
high-speed
fun.
rail.
And a lot of the reason why you want to build it like in that kind of region is because the skill-based trade jobs are already there. You know, a lot of these folks lost their jobs in the last 2 decades, but you could bring them back to them. They also have rail already from the coal infrastructure and stuff like that.
I'm gonna keep moving the slides. What do we got here?
Yes, I think we addressed a lot of these issues, how nuclear waste is is extremely unpopular in
Yeah.
America, and then we talked about how it's basically the greatest challenge to the future of deployment of nuclear energy. We talked about that. We
Yeah.
also talked about how we are currently reliant on other countries for our nuclear fuel supply chain. And we talked about how we're not building our fuel fleet sustainably, like we discussed, that
Oh, I
we're
like
not
the
building
closed fuel
sustainable
cycle.
fleets.
Dude,
And that,
closed
by the
fuel
way, is a
cycle.
picture of the Russian reactor that's doing that kind of stuff.
This one here?
The one
Or the
before.
one right before? So they're literally have closed fuel cycle?
Yeah, they are working on a closed fuel cycle. And the Russians, they've invested about $20 billion in their nuclear energy industry, and they have over $250 billion in orders internationally. And those are reactors that the US is missing out on. And the Chinese are like, wait, if the Russians are doing this, like, then why are we not doing it? So they were like, hold my beer. And they basically invested $450 billion with a B into their nuclear sector. So that way they were able to then, they believe they're going to create a $4 trillion market with their Belt and Road Initiative. And the US should be there.
How fast?
As
How quickly could we spin one of these factories up?
I believe that within 10 years, if we really had like a all hands on deck type of approach, like we did for other technologies, we could within a decade be back to where we were in the saddle.
All right, that's awesome. So we're talking more about
So yeah, so
closing
that's
the
kind of
cycle.
like our philosophy. Like we built a whole company around this concept of closing the fuel cycle.
I'm flying through this, but if you want
Yeah,
me to
no, that's fine.
slow
So we
down,
talked
let me
about the
know.
nuclear waste issue. So here's a very interesting anecdote I don't think we talked about. Did you know that you and I, as taxpayers, pay about $1 billion a year in liabilities to the utilities for the nuclear
No,
waste?
no. What does that mean?
So in 2013, the federal government had this thing called the standard contract, which where they were going to come and take all the waste and put it into Yucca Mountain. But then the federal government never collected the waste because Yucca Mountain failed. So in 2013, the utilities all sued the federal government, like, you're not taking care of your responsibility, and they won. And now the federal government pays out of the judgment fund $1 billion a year in liabilities to the utilities every single year.
Oh, because they're holding the waste in their locales or something.
Exactly.
Oh God, it's still calling it waste is a misnomer at this point. It's unused energy.
Unspent nuclear fuel. Completely agree.
Yeah, let's spend it. I want to.
So
This
that's
is your
kind of like
facility,
like a little image of like our ecosystem. Yeah.
dude. That's awesome. As wow, I'm gonna look at this on my own too. Yeah,
And that's what we
dude.
talked about, all the materials that you can extract.
Okay, so if
30 million homes powered by this facility,
any
by the fuel it produces.
anybody that wants to get a good look at these, you can always pause the video or when you're going back through and read the slides.
So these are like the lab resources that we're using to finish up our proof of concept experimentation with our national lab partners.
What are these things? Floor
So what you're looking
electrowinning.
at, there are different forms of chemistry that produce the results that we talked about.
Yes, man, I love this stuff.
And then
Are these
obviously,
three
like, we're
different
just
companies?
comparing ourselves to other companies of like what other companies are doing that are trying to do recycling, but we feel very strongly that our technology is far superior. But that's my shameless plug.
Yeah, yeah. This is Curio stuff. And these are different applications for.
Exactly. That's like all the applications that you can extract from the waste if you close the fuel cycle.
Wow, man, jeez. Yeah, people have been telling me nuclear, and it's like I got to hear about it. Literally reusing the waste, the unspent
Yeah, and
stuff.
then so this is a very interesting thing. So like once you start doing the nuclear waste recycling, we're like, wait, if we're going to produce 40 metric tons of transuranic fuel a year, shouldn't we design a reactor that can use that fuel, right? So we then designed the reactor and we patented it, called HOPE, which is our HOPE reactor, our homogeneous plutonium eliminating reactor. And that's in the next page. which shows this reactor. I'm not really showing anything, but it's basically a molten salt reactor that would have a really good conversion system and a high heat density. So it basically is utilized in three ways. One as an energy source, one as a heat source for manufacturing, and three as a heat source for desalination. So it's a 3-in-1 application.
Oh, wow. Desalination. Now there's something you want to talk about, saving the planet and human beings.
That's what we need. We need water. So this reactor, because of its heat density, it will be a perfect application to co-locate with a desal plant.
So what do? You boil the water and then just recondense it, and now you've got desalinated.
Yeah, and you don't then need to use electricity to do it because the reactor creates the heat automatically to boil the water.
Yes, that's called exergy, when reusing spent, like, the lost energy for other purposes. Oh, I love
Exactly, and that's what we're all about.
Man, here we go. I think we've talked about this stuff basically.
Yeah, for sure.
Coming through hard. What are these?
So yeah, so we've already have 6 states that we have under engagement, over 10 companies that we're working with, some publicly not. We have 4 national partners, soon a 5th. And here's one of the things that's interesting, like the partnerships that we've built have been really, and that's in the next slide that you just missed. Cool. Like we've built in a basically, since we've gone out of stealth in 20, I think it was 20 September 20, in January 2022, we've built all these partnerships, like we've been really building a lot of relationships, and a lot of amazing companies want to work with us. And it's exciting because that it shows that there's a lot of opportunity. And I believe that that's just going to accelerate as we prove out our technology.
Yeah, that's for sure. Are you guys working with the government at all right now? Department of Energy?
Yeah, we received 3 different grants from the federal government. In fact, we were they just started a Curio program serendipitously, like when we started came out of stealth, and we applied for the grant. And our first grant, we won $6.5 million with the ARPA-E program. And the ARPA-E program is a very cool program. It's basically like a VC accelerator that's funded by the government. And like, look, this is the kind of thing we should be doing with government money, is kind of cultivating technologies, right? The government does a lot of due diligence before they fund these kind of deep tech early stage companies like ours. So that's like I can't speak for the rest of what the government does use its money for, but for the ARPA-E program, I could say it's helped bring a lot of technologies to market.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything that our tax money is best suited for, is enhancing and like solidifying our electrical system, our grids, and our energy systems. I mean, that's like the number one, that and our water sources, I think.
Absolutely. And this is the big challenge, is that a lot of the money, unfortunately, does go to winners and losers, and the government does a lot of times, like, like with Solyndra and other times, where these companies get big bucks and they're not really supposed to. But ARPA-E is very well known for really doing an extensive due diligence on its applicants before it gives them money.
ARPA, that's like where DARPA came from. I think ARPA,
right. So it's like the ARPA-E instead of DARPA, exactly.
Oh, cool. Is this the just an ecosystem of what like an entire plant would look like?
And like, but then you see that there's like a town there, and what other ancillary opportunities it would create for like the community.
Oh man, can you build these things underground too? These facilities?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you build them in orbit?
We're working on a nuclear reactor for space also. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to.
Yeah, I could show that to you offline. That's
awesome.
That's like a more classified type of orientation.
Yeah, I want to build a space elevator, or at least be involved. I know they're.
I also want to build a space elevator.
I should talk. Liftport is the company, and it's Michael Lane is heading it. They're going to build one on the moon first because of the low gravity, and then they're going to use that as a blueprint. So maybe we can.
That would be so cool if they pull that off. My engineers tell me I'm crazy that they think it's not possible. I think it's very possible.
It is, with new material science like graphene and other benzene.
Exactly.
Type.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
strength of these tethers is off the charts, and you can actually use like the piezoelectric bounce from these tethers to produce electricity as well.
For sure.
We'll get some experts on and go deeper. Michael Lane would be a great interview. I got to get in touch with him. So this is your team at Curio?
Yeah. And then we brought together a pretty strong advisory board from like industry with a lot of smart people, all well-known names in the industry.
Nice.
And this is kind of like my spiritual mentor, Dr. Alvin Weinberg. He basically said that to deny the rebirth of nuclear energy is to deny human ingenuity and aspiration, right? And we went and we trademarked the second nuclear era. So we got
good.
that.
What? Thank you for doing all this.
Oh, my pleasure. So do you have any questions? Does your audience have any questions?
I'm sure they do. Send in some super chat, some questions, guys. And we're going to get to them. And also, like, what's up with fusion, man? We talked a lot about fission, and they say nuclear. There's both fission and fusion. They're both nuclear. And that word nuclear gets kind of vague in those terms. But do you ever even look into that kind of thing?
So I looked at, when I was looking to invest in both technologies, an investor, and I invest several million already into my company. I was like thinking to myself, like, is it fusion or fusion? And I basically came to the conclusion that fission is the low hanging fruit, because we're so far away from fusion. We just don't have the seed material, the tritium, to be able to actually start these reactors up. And also there is this, what we call the power conversion equation, which basically, your fusion, in order for it to be successful, has to produce more power than it consumes. And right now we haven't gotten there yet. It's good.
Oh, what's that?
No, I'm just gonna say it's gonna take a long time.
I was thinking about rewriting the ideal gas law, or adding on to the ideal gas law, which is P equals, what is it? PV equals nRT. I'm not an expert with this, but it's basically saying that the pressure multiplied by the volume equals the change of the rate of temperature of a system. So it's like the more pressure you put into a tube, the bigger it's going to get, or the hotter it's going to get. And the bigger you make a tube, the same thing. So there's all these interrelated, but what that doesn't take into account is it's only explaining tubular or like linear systems of expansion. If you consider that systems can expand exponentially, if you increase the temperature, you're gonna get bigger faster, which is gonna produce friction. And that friction comes from without the system. A lot of these things assume that there are such things as closed systems, but there aren't. In fusive systems, you're getting energy from outside is coming in to join. So you're getting it hotter faster from the rapid expansion. And if someone can rewrite that ideal gas law or add on to it to explain exponential increase in systems, I think that we can let the basic scientific community understand that fusion is real. You're not getting more out of it you're putting into it, because the energy is already there in the system.
I think that we will get to fusion. I just think that there's a matter of economics. And I think that it's going to take about 2 to 3 decades before it becomes economical. And I think that you're going to need a robust nuclear energy sector on the fission side to be able to support a fusion side. And I think that they will both act like tangentially, like they're both going to be in sync.
If you just start pumping out tritium, which is hydrogen with 2 added neutrons, I think.
Yeah, and that comes from the fission process. When you go through the fission process, you produce tritium. In fact, all the tritium that I'm aware of that exists today comes from one of the reactors in our national lab that is specifically built to breed tritium.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. Wow, that's so cool. All right. Yo, we nailed it. You had another company called Materia. I mean, we could just keep going and going, but I want to get to the super chats and some of the audience. We have a few.
Materia is basically a rare earth and critical mineral company extracting rare earth and critical minerals from abandoned mine lands.
So you guys say that again one more time. I was pulling
we are working on developing technologies that will give us the ability to extract the materials, multi-commodities, aluminum, lithium, cobalt, neodymium, copper, zinc, and all those materials from like abandoned mine lands.
Oh, awesome. So like the stuff that hadn't gotten pulled out of the mining process is still there waiting to be taken.
And there's over 500,000 sites across the country.
Cool. All right.
So if we could figure that out, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Well, we got Farion with big super sale. I don't know what CZK is. Is that Czechoslovakian money? That's cool. 1,000 of it, whatever it is. Thanks a lot, dude. Thank you, Farion, for blasting in. Who else we got? Brewmaster Monk said to ask you if you believe the West is Edom or if it's just you. So is this a rabbinical thing?
I guess he's asking me. No, I do not believe the West is Edom.
What's Edom?
Edom, I think, is like the kingdom of Edom in the Bible.
Was that okay?
I knew this was going to happen, but I'm all game for it.
Yeah, we haven't even talked about the Bible yet.
We haven't even talked about Israel yet. That's why I told you, got to get me on the Timcast. We could then sit there for 3 hours and you could talk to me about anything.
Oh, it's so great. I would love to. I was just thinking the other day, because my friend was like, the kingdom of Judah predates the Canaanites. And I'm like, well, no, I think Canaan was first because Abraham died in Canaan and his great grandson was Judah. So the tribe of Judah was well after Canaan.
Absolutely.
Like, how far back does it go? You know, you could just keep going. It's like 90,000 years ago that there were humans found in that area.
No, I do believe though that obviously, here this is gonna be a can of worms, but I obviously don't believe that. I believe that the Jews today are descendants of the Jews that lived in the biblical times, obviously.
Yeah, I would think at least a lot of them. It's tough to
Yeah.
say, but well, we should do another episode maybe and talk about Judaism.
I'm down.
You're the rabbi, man. How
I'm
long
the
have you been a
rabbi,
rabbi?
but like that's that people ask me, why do I go with the name? Why did I go with rabbi, right? And I was like, well, if a reverend in business can go by reverend, why can't I go by rabbi? You know? And at the end of the day, I'm a practicing rabbi. I have a lot of books here. You see, I have here my Psalms right here.
What is that?
And reading my Psalms for world peace.
What are like? Is that a book of Psalms? Is that a specific book?
Yeah.
Is that called the Book of Psalms?
Yeah, it's called Tehillim, which is in Hebrew, right?
Dude, shout out to Abraham, man. That motherfucker knew.
Yeah, that guy was, by the way, that guy was gangster, Abraham.
Dude,
literally like went into got thrown into a fire and walked out alive.
Oh, wow. Dude, brute force. That's God's energy. Yeah, when I heard that in more recent times, what is it? The guy, that Russian guy that was like in the ear of the emperor or the king at the time, the early 1900s.
Which one is that?
He was like the weird spiritual mystic that came along to the Russian monarchy and was like in the
Rasputin.
When they tried to kill him, they couldn't. They like shot him and stabbed him and he wouldn't die. And it's like that's God's energy was like flowing through him, keeping him alive.
Yeah, that guy was probably doing tapping into some crazy stuff.
I thought you were gonna be like doing some crazy methamphetamines too. Who knows?
Oh, probably. He probably was on some heavy drugs.
Yeah, but I do believe God's spirit can keep you alive through trauma and stuff. So that's interesting to hear about.
Listen, you know what? People with psychedelics have experienced some crazy spiritual experiences. I've never done shrooms, but like I have friends who have, and they like had these crazy out of body experiences.
Yeah, I've had very clear communication with what I thought was a demon. I just said, "Speak to me, demon," and I heard this voice like, "Oh, like going on for minutes," and then I just kept listening. I was like, I could be afraid of that, but I'm going to listen because I'm brave. I was just listening, and then it took on a conversational tone, and I realized all these evil, angry. It's just, it wanted to be understood. It was angry that it's people were afraid of it, and if you're not afraid, then it's not angry. Is the lesson
that makes sense? It's brought down in the Talmud.
What is
there? We just went down another rabbit hole.
that same thing is like the
the demons are not bad. They're just servants for God to just do His will. You know, like everything is a servant of God. So like God is pretty much running the show, and He has different things doing different things. Obviously, angels are doing things that are that are apparently that to human beings look good, and then demons are doing things that apparently look bad, but it's all part of the master plan because everything's good, right? And that's something that is profound and deep because it's very hard for us to comprehend what that actually means. Like, how could it be that my friend, like my uncle, just recently passed away from pancreatic cancer at 56 years old, right? Like, it was a terrible thing. Within 9 months of his diagnosis, he died. How's that possible, right? He was a young, successful orthodontist, a classic Jewish job, by the way. And no, the answer is that obviously we just don't understand what the reason is, but obviously there's that opportunity. But to answer your listener's question, so yeah, there's potentially, we have to look into it. I'll ask my technical guys.
I'll read it out loud. Hal Gailey says, would it be possible to use the Peltier effect to generate electricity from the heat transferring from the salt to the water? Are you familiar with the Peltier effect and what it is?
I'm not. I'm going to have to ask my engineers.
Let me grab the Peltier, and if anyone wants to clarify what that is, I feel like I should always have like a physicist, a chemist, and a mathematician on the show with me at all times so that we can crack apart all of this. The Peltier effect. This is from Wikipedia, and I'll pull this up because why not? You know, I'm able to because this technology is so freaking incredible.
There's so much that we've not even tapped the surface of our potential as humans.
It's straight up the direct conversion of temperature differences to electrical voltage.
Yeah, I would hope so. If they can figure out how to do that, then it would. Yeah, of course.
I think so. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if it has something to do
We're
with
looking
piezo.
at a bunch of different companies that are working on conversion methods, because I'm a big believer that if you can extract the value without steam, then you don't need your reactor can be a 1 gigawatt reactor, and it could be literally the size of a compact sedan, you know, like which is then much easier to get up to orbit, because what is the big issue with nuclear in orbit is that it's extremely heavy, so the payload is very heavy, so that you need a massive rocket to get up to space to take you there.
Do you ever look at these spin launch systems?
Yeah, look, we have so many opportunities to change the way we do things, but like obviously, like, you know, Elon Musk's going to be in business for a long time because rocket technology is here for the next 2-3 decades before we break through with other technologies.
Yeah, this spin launch stuff is fascinating. They just get it spinning.
Yeah,
really,
spinning it up and spinning it up into space. The question is that will be great for materials. I don't know how it's going to work for human beings with all the G's.
Yeah, I think humans need the elevator or to really make it pleasant.
Yeah,
and then
we're not going to be able to get shot up there with, like, you know, hundreds of G's into space.
Yeah. Propellers with ion thrusters, those interest me too. I think drone delivery.
Yeah, all this
is
stuff is amazing. And you know what? I don't know how they raise money, because that, like, they're so far away, but somehow they convince people to give them money, and all the power to them.
All right, we got another super chat here from Neurodivergent. Hey, Ian, check out Bart Ehrman, misquoting Jesus. He has all the Christian rep, but talks about where and why humans change the biblical story for gain. I actually have a book called Creating Christ, I think it is as well, about something about the Romans kind of setting him up as a new character for people to worship because the Jews were so powerful and had threatened to the power structure of the Roman Empire. So they're like, we got to figure something out to get these people to work. But, you know, I mean,
fascinating. I never heard that before.
1800 years ago. I mean, the second tenet of Judaism is there are no false idols. Do not worship any other thing than God. God is me. And it's like, that means money. That means people. Don't worship a human. And then right away, it's like, here's Jesus, worship him. And it's like, that violates the second of the 10 commandments.
But the Christians worship Jesus?
Well, some of them do. They say, like, he's my God. I speak to God through him. And it's like, you can just speak to God.
So I thought that they speak to God through him, like they look at, like, the Trinity as God, the Spirit, and the Holy Ghost, and Jesus is one of the Trinity, right?
Yeah. And at this point, I would want to get a scholar on here because I do not want to even begin to misrepresent the faith. And there's ways, different forms of Christianity.
Right. I guess there's different forms. There's also different forms of Judaism, really. I mean, obviously but they're not really, the differences in Judaism are not really so much about faith. They're more about what Judaism is, right? Like, we have the Orthodoxy, which is pretty much the most aligned with traditional Judaism, although people will argue that it's evolved over the last 2,000 years, right? And then you have a more two different kind of evolutions from that happened during the Emancipation and the whole French Revolution and the Enlightenment period, the Reform and the Conservative Jews, who are much more oriented about social justice, and that and that you don't have to keep the 613 commandments anymore, and that you can, like, desecrate the Sabbath, because it's like, it's all about modernization of the faith, right? So they and they also, like, don't believe necessarily in God the way I believe. They believe in the Bible more as like a book of morals that we should follow, but at the end of the day, it's not actually the word of God, which I believe is blasphemy, obviously.
The word of God, dude. That's cymatics. I feel like this vibration is like causing us, maybe not directing us to write things in the way we do or speak in the way we do, but maybe it
Yeah,
is.
for sure. That's how prophecy works. Prophecy is where people are. And look, we all, you see, whether you believe in God or not, I was thinking about this the other day. I was watching this documentary on Netflix called Life on Earth. And it was like basically this like prehistoric, like it was built with like, it was animated by like the folks who did like the animation for Jurassic Park. And it's all about like early stages of development of species on this planet through evolution and all that kind of stuff. And as a person of faith, I was sitting there and it's obviously making it seem like it's all by chance. And I was turning to my wife, I was like, aliens, God, cosmos, whatever you want to call it, like there was intelligent design on this planet. Like it doesn't make sense otherwise. Like you have to be you have to be like a little bit like, I don't know, I don't want to be I don't want to disparage anybody, but it's a little silly to believe that all of these kind of things, that the earth is positioned exactly where it's positioned in the solar system, exactly the way to make the world operate in the way it world, and the entire evolution of the planet and the way that it evolved in order to create the right conditions for cells to orient themselves in the ocean, and then for them to evolve in the way that they did, and everything like you said, like it's very unlikely, right? So like, but the reason is that we don't want, why do people not want to believe that there's intelligent design? Because that they don't want to, believe that there's something that's a power beyond them, because then they lose control.
Yeah,
I think
but
we're
oh, is it?
no,
It's
go ahead.
it's empowering to think that we're tapped into that sentient. I don't know. I wonder what like intelligence. I feel like is an animal thing, but that sentience is beyond like sentient design. And that the human consciousness is tapped into our own formation through like the Schumann resonance. And then if our planet has a Schumann resonance, this like extremely low frequency that's like tapped into the way humans feel and stuff, hypothetically,
Oh,
that would mean that the
absolutely.
sun would have a Schumann resonance and that the galactic core would have a Schumann resonance. And
Oh, for
why?
sure. No, and I believe that all these things are possible, and they all can coalesce with my faith, because it's not a contradiction.
Like, have you heard that theory that we're inside of a black hole? That
I've heard that theory.
and that's why everything's black out there, or not why, but just kind of aligns with that. I think that's pretty
See, it's funny.
fascinating.
We should do another podcast because we could talk about Kabbalah, because the Kabbalah talks about how we are in a black hole.
Yeah, we should do that. Let's do that maybe in the next three weeks or early on in December. Maybe we can wrap it
I'll
around
show
and
you a map of how like the Jewish mysticism views us, but like it believes that we are within like, and that's what it means in the Bible, that God said in the beginning, let there be light, because there was just darkness everywhere, because that God is obviously all light, but he created darkness to contain matter within his existence.
do you think that God was a dude that rolled into town, killed everybody, a bunch of people, and was like burned all the history books? He's like, I'm God now, and he had a flashlight. He had
No,
electricity.
I don't believe that. I believe that God is beyond our comprehension, but I believe that God is everything and nothing.
Well, I think God is real. Real God is real, and then that humans have co-opted it over the history, and that certain
Oh
dudes
yeah,
are like,
yeah, for sure. Not a
because like
question.
ancient Atlantis, they seem to have electricity with, or like the Egyptians, they had these Baghdad batteries. They could run a charge. They had like, there's that hieroglyph of a dude holding what looks like a giant flashlight bulb. And if God's like, let there be light, and there was light, like, dude, maybe he had a flashlight. Maybe he could just click it on, whoever that guy was. But at the same time, it also makes sense with the universe forming stars and things.
Right, but like in the Bible, they talk about the Tower of Babel, right? And the Tower of Babel in Genesis was apparently a tower that reached the heavens. You know what that is? Like in my mind, and again, I'm not talking about it as a rabbi, just as like a science fiction freak. To me, that's like a Stargate, like a portal to a different realm. They created a portal. They figured out a way to get to the heavens, which is a different realm of existence.
The Native Americans had stargates. There are where they would have areas where they would get inside these circles, and that would enhance their ability to astrally project. And if
Makes sense.
the Babel thing is like a bunch of words and voices, all these different languages. So if people are surrounding the guy in the center of this circle and all like uttering different languages and tongues,
And they all spoke, according to the Bible, the same language. And then God then basically, because then they tried to project themselves to God's realm and do war with him. So he basically created languages and nations and split it into 70 different dialects, that in order to create confusion and war and strife. So therefore they wouldn't be able to go up and attack him anymore. That's in the Bible.
Got a couple more super chats here. Let's see. We have this is from Stuart Walker. Hey, Ian, love you. Read John's Gospel. It'll clear up your views on Christianity. Thank you. You know, James Tour actually suggested I start with John chapter 1 as well, and I had it queued up. I still have it queued up. I started reading. It's like 10 minutes long. I guess John's the guy.
So what is this when they have like a little £5 sterling? Is that like a support for your channel?
Yeah, that's through YouTube, and YouTube takes
cool.
30%. It's awesome, and it highlights it. It makes it easy to see. Yeah, it really is. It keeps the channel going. So keep the super chats coming in. It's an excellent way to propel this.
Yeah, guys, $5 is not enough. You got to give more. This is quality content over here.
Give me the top tier. Here's Hal Gailey coming in, or $5. It's like the Matrix. The 3D universe is only, quote, real to we who live in it. It's an infinitesimal splinter of God's consciousness made manifest.
Yeah, agree with what he said. Yeah.
Like, I try to think of like, what's the fifth dimension? Is that the infinite wave of possibility where we collapse it into the fourth dimensional activity through which we form this three-dimensional perception?
Yeah, and like every dimension that can exist in some sort of form of matter is God manifesting it. Like God is not matter. God is beyond matter. That's what we say, that you can't comprehend God. And when Moses said to God in the Bible, he says to him, I want to see you. I want to know what you are. So God basically said, no man can see me and live, because that's impossible, because we are confined to the matter and to the whole concept of matter.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, it makes as much sense as I can humanly conceive of.
Absolutely.
I'd shit myself if I was perceiving God. Like literally my gut would open up so much that all my entire organs would be like flush. Maybe, I don't know. I'm interested in ayahuasca, and I plan on doing an ayahuasca ceremony. Maybe I'll get close to seeing. It's like physics and limits in physics. You don't actually ever see the thing you're trying to measure. You can only see the visage around it and then kind of get an idea what it is. Maybe that's kind of like perceiving.
Yeah, but one day I believe we will transcend.
Maybe through like virtual reality or some sort of.
I mean, no, transcend like as humans. Like we're going to become different. We will eventually become an interplanetary species. We will eventually become an intergalactic species, and we will eventually develop psychic powers. I mean, like if you think about it, with the advent of AI, humanity is going to have to force itself to evolve through genetic engineering to be able to become better than artificial intelligence. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, there's this thing called ephaptic coupling, where your neurons interact with other neurons that are through magnetic fields, not through chemicals, but like that. It seems like that's psychic influence.
Yeah, we're gonna start, like I'm saying, Neuralink is probably one of the early infancy places of that kind of engineering.
I'm very excited, man. Yechezkel Moskowitz, dude. Excellent show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
And to everyone watching, follow the channel, subscribe, like the video, fire off super chats whenever and wherever you like. And Yechezkel, what's the best place for people to follow you right now? Follow your work.
I'm on LinkedIn, and they can follow what we're doing at our website, Curio.energy.
Curio.
People keep telling me I should get onto social media, so I have to think about it.
It's a great idea.
I left when Trump got banned.
Yeah, come on back, and then we can pump it up, and we'll chat on maybe on X, on Minds, on YouTube, wherever, anywhere videos are found and downloaded. All right, man. Thanks again, everyone watching. Love you. Have a great day. Take care of yourself.